Greetings everyone, welcome to another Classic WoW.live guide. My name is Melderon, and I'm happy to present the Elemental Shaman Endgame PvE guide written by Caperfin with some help from myself. As with all my guides, a pinned comment below will have timestamps how you navigate, and if you want to read the slides on your own pace, there will be a link to Google Slides, as well as a link to the actual written guide written by Caperfin on Classic WoW.live that goes into a lot more detail, some of the things we will not be covering over in the PowerPoint. With that, let's get started. Let's go over first some Elemental Shaman fantasy. Fire, frost, and lightning. These destructive forces of nature serve as the Elemental Shaman's sword, shield, and armor. As Shaman age, they gain access to deeper levels of mystical knowledge by communing with the ancestors and the elements. Through these practices, it becomes possible to harness the raw powers of the planet itself. Most Shaman that reach this level of spiritual maturity specialize in restorative magic and medicines. However, some delve deeper into these unbridled forces, becoming conduits for flame, ice, and lightning. Elemental Shaman are known for unleashing massive amounts of damage in short periods of time, leaving their foes vanquished, or wishing that they were. Now, before we get started, I'd like to go over some prerequisite videos that could aid you in understanding this guide at a higher level. The first is my Advanced Shaman Guide, which goes over a lot of different things: spell coefficients, talents, stats, stat priorities, and some higher end stuff that may be helpful if you're playing as a shaman. There is a part 2 that's coming out. It may already be out depending on when you're watching this video. Head down to the description below and check if it's already finished. Part 2 will cover a lot of things that I've learned from the Classic WoW beta and some corrections I've made due to differences in the beta versus private servers. The next is my Shaman Totem Guide, which goes over all the totems, what they do, why they're beneficial, and since you are a shaman, you will be using totems in raids, so knowing which totems to use in what situations is very beneficial. Now, I'd like to introduce the author of this guide and someone who's going to be joining me in this video guide, Caperfin. He is the author of the Elemental Shaman PvE written guide, which is available on Classic WoW.live. He is the creator of the Elemental Shaman gear lists, which this video will reference, and something that you should reference when you're choosing gear for your Elemental Shaman. And he's also created the Elemental Enchant list, which you can reference if you're looking for certain enchants for new pieces of gear if you're an Elemental Shaman endgame. He has ample experience with Classic Shaman dungeon and raid tanking, DPS, and healing, and theory crafting. He also makes some very interesting instructional videos on a lot of different topics, not just Shaman, on his YouTube channel. Check out the link to his channel in the description, and he has a community Discord as well. All those links will be below. Now, before we get started, this slide is a syllabus. It goes over all the different things we'll be covering, from race selection to good professions to choose for an Elemental Shaman, buffs, debuffs, how you can manage your mana, and even leveling as an Elemental Shaman. I would use the timestamps below if you're returning to this guide or if you want to skip to a certain section so you can move through the guide more efficiently. We're going to get started. Caperfin's going to join us in just about a second. Just want to say that Caperfin's going to be going over a large quantity of this guide, and I'll be filling in anything for reference or what I think is important. So, Caperfin, take it away.
Hey guys, the name's Caperfin, and welcome to my guide. Before continuing, I'd like to address a common negative stigma surrounding Shaman DPS in World of Warcraft. Many players don't recognize a Shaman as an optimal source for damage, and just simply disregard their existence. That's pretty harsh. This stigma is mainly due to a lack of information or a lack of initiative to make it work, and people just rather blaze through the game playing something else. Usually, when people talk about shamans, the immediate thought is a restoration healing shaman, and the legitimacy of a shaman dealing damage as a caster is just thrown under the bus. But today, we have tons of tools for gearing, breaking down the numbers, proper rotation, proper mana, you name it. It's never been more approachable. Now, here's a little disclaimer before moving on. The Shaman, not only by itself, is a class that demands a great deal of effort for players to recognize, but also the specific path we'll be going on in this guide. It is definitely not for the faint of heart. So, no slackers. I'll whip you guys into shape. Remember, you are not just a pure DPS class, you also have supportive capabilities. As an old man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. Now, let's talk races. Races, just like any other thing that will be covered in this guide, needs to be optimized. There are 3 available races to the Shaman: Troll, Tauren, and Orc. Sadly, our long-legged friend, the Troll, is the only race that provides a direct benefit to PvE caster-oriented DPS. However, if you want to play something else, go for it. I won't stop you. If you like how orcs look like, go for it. But just know that your DPS output won't be the maximum it could be. PvP, on the other hand, is a totally different subject. Hardiness from Orc is a godsend, and to a lesser extent, War Stomp from Tauren does have its situational benefits as well. Now, let's take a detailed look at the Troll. You might be asking yourself, Caperfin, why Troll? Why exactly? Well, in short, it's because of Berserking. Berserking increases casting speed based on your remaining HP. A faster casting speed means not only damage is dealt faster, but also effects that we will look at later are triggered faster. Okay guys, time to address the elephant in the room. I wouldn't be thorough if I did not address this. Anything that resembles an elemental should have some level of nature resistance, but there are ways to remedy this. Gear with spell penetration in its tooltip, for example, is very good for us, as well as gear that reduces the target's resistance. For example, Eye of Moam and Staff of the Kiraji Prophets.
So yeah, guys, this is actually really important. From my experience, having a lot of your spell damage being mitigated from nature resistance actually feels pretty bad. This is something you're going to have to try to mitigate as much as possible and deal with as much as possible for Phase 5 when these pieces come out. The great part about it is that these pieces are not only good for that reason, but they're also really high on Caperfin's gear list because of their other stats. So they're actually very good pieces of gear. The table on the top right shows you just how resistance affects your DPS. So let's say the boss has 200 nature resistance. It's a 50% loss in DPS. It can be really staggering, and this honestly is the biggest issue with elemental DPS. It's not the mana. You can effectively stay up using a combination of consumables, potions, and downranking. I have experience with elemental raiding, I can tell you that firsthand. The biggest thing is this nature resistance. Good thing is in Phase 5 and 6, you're going to have gear that's going to be dropping, which either spell penetration or it'll say it'll decrease the resistance of your target by X amount. Very important to get these pieces if you want to really start doing some damage. But in the meantime, just try to deal with it. It's something you're just kind of have to deal with, and you're going to have to know going in that you're going to be doing less damage on a lot of different bosses and mobs.
Okay boys, time for professions. In the leveling and early endgame, we're looking at herbalism and alchemy. The potions we get from alchemy can improve our DPS. Oh yeah, you should look like a walking pharmacy making that sweet, sweet dough. In the late game, we're picking up engineering by dropping herbalism. Our days of picking up plants and roses on the ground are long past us. We're getting our engineering degree on so we can build some powerful gadgets for us and our raid. Now, I should mention, it's important you portray an overall positive attitude by helping others with any potions or tools they might need. This will put a positive light on how people perceive you.
And for secondary professions, we actually recommend for you to get all of them. All of them can benefit you in some way. First aid provides healing that does not require mana. That could be huge. Cooking allows you to get useful food buffs like Nightfin Soup and Run Ton Super Surprise. Instead of buying that stuff, you can farm it and make it yourself, especially if you have fishing. So fishing, again, will benefit cooking and they'll work synergistically to either give you these buffs or make you money. We suggest to get all three.
You get a buff, you get a buff, everyone gets a buff. But remember, you can only have 32 buffs. Those are the rules. Sorry, I didn't make them. We're looking to acquire buffs that increase our spell crit, spell power, maximum mana, and mana regen. If you somehow lack in a certain area, a buff can sometimes be the solution. It's important to properly value what you need exactly. So let's take a look at what exactly I'm talking about. For spell crit chance, I suggest Slipkick Savvy. And if you are super nice to your raid leader, try and get into a group with a balanced druid who has Moonkin form. Ooh, that spell crit chance. For spell damage, get your hands on Flask of Supreme Power. But remember, they can be quite expensive, so use one if you are playing at your best and you're in tip-top shape. You'll also want to acquire Greater Arcane Elixir, which is a bit more feasible price-wise. Now, let's take a look at intellect buffs. We want to have the biggest of brains. You can never go wrong by filling your stomach with a delicious Run Tum Tuber Surprise, increasing intellect by 10 for 10 minutes. And make sure the mages throw a arcane intellect your way. You can scowl at them until you do. You have my permission. Now for MP5 buffs. We have Mana Spring Totem, which is basically just in our own backyard. How great is that? It's also wise to be in the same group as a Restoration talented shaman to take advantage of Mana Tide Totem. If mana is disappearing at an alarming rate, an Innervate can be a potential solution to that. If your weapon is feeling a bit lonely, throw a temporary weapon enchant like Brilliant Mana Oil to rectify that. Now let's take a look at combination buffs. I keep saying this in every one of my guides, make sure to get Song Flower Serenade. There's no reason not to have it. Spell crit and 15 to all stats is absolutely heavenly. I mean, just look at the tooltip art, it even looks like heaven. Speaking of stats, also look to get Mark of the Wild as well. And if you deem yourself a somewhat hardcore person, you can look into getting Mark of the Chosen and triggering its effect, and then simply remove the trinket and the effect will persist. Also, get Limited Invulnerability Potion so you can get out of those sticky situations if you, for example, accidentally pull a mob or God knows what. Now, time to move on to probably my favorite topic that I'm sure many of you who have been following my guides are somewhat sick of me saying, but let's talk about mind control buffs. I need to preface this by saying this is not for everyone. Many high-end guilds may want to consider getting certain buffs from Alliance Priests and Paladins by getting mind controlled by an Alliance Priest using mind control or with the Gnomish mind control cap. Now, this is serious business, not to be taken lightly, but if you're looking to do the most damage possible, look into getting Greater Blessing of Kings, Greater Blessing of Wisdom. Naturally, your guild members can also look into getting buffs for themselves. Now, if you thought we're out of the woods just yet, sorry, that's not the case. Similar to mind control buffs, there are mind control mob buffs. Pretty hardcore, isn't it? Well, like I said before, this is not 100% necessary, but if you want to stand out, at least consider it. The most influential buffs are Resist Fire for the Molten Core raid and Fury of Ragnaros to just flat out increase our damage. But keep in mind, Fury of Ragnaros only lasts 30 minutes, so get your butt to the instance or have a Warlock summon you. Now, let's talk about special event buffs. And notice I say special. I gotta be honest here, guys, it's not exactly easy to get these buffs, but luckily, there are multiple events that we can take advantage of and plenty of goodies for our picking. The most notable buff is from Winter Veil, which grants a whopping 30 intellect, and the Lunar Festival buff, which gives 10% to all stats. Now, you might be asking yourself, Caperfin, can you please get to the point? What buffs in conclusion am I looking to get? Can you just honestly give me a list? Well, on the screen right now are two screenshots. One on the left that assumes you are absolutely pushing the limit and getting the best buffs out there, and another screenshot on the right that deals in a more realistic situation. Now, let's talk about debuffs. There are a total of 16 debuffs possible on the boss, and we're looking to fill each of those bad boys with a really good debuff. I'll be going through a few of these juicy debuffs in just a moment. Also, it's assumed these debuffs are at their maximum rank or talent improvement. Now, let's talk about damage increasing debuffs. If you didn't know, Thunder Fury, Blessed Blade of the Windseeker, please spam in the comments, applies a debuff that reduces the target's nature resistance by 25. Ugh, so good. Next is the debuff from Nightfall, which is usually being applied by a tank or a DPS class who has the responsibility of applying it. And no, I'm not going to get into a debate of who should be wielding it. If you're looking to achieve an orgasmic ascension of damage, look no further than Stormstrike. It may be a while until you see it on the boss, but when you do, The next topic is mana, Jment. Most likely, many of you are wondering, Caperfin, what about mana? Well, first of all, can you please calm down? There are solutions. Now, this isn't to say they never run out of mana, but rather that it's exaggerated. If you look into putting the effort into playing an Elemental Shaman, look into putting effort into getting Major Mana Potion, Demonic Ruin, Major Rejuvenation Potion, and the abysmally easy to get Night Dragon's Breath. Remember guys, potions also don't share a cooldown with consumables like Demonic Ruin. Now, let's explore stat priority. In general, like any other DPS caster class in the game, we also want spell hit. But let's get into the nitty gritty. Stat priority depends on the phase you're currently in. In phase number 1 and 2, there exist so few spell hit pieces of gear. Luckily, thank the Beyond, the best damage dealing belt and neck, Bantok Sash, and Star of Mysteria happens to have spell hit on it. So generally, in phase 1 and 2, we're looking at spell hit, followed by spell damage, followed by spell crit, and finally intellect. If however, a boss fight lasts more than about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, look into getting intellect over spell crit since you absolutely need that extra mana. In phase 3, an abundance of spell damage gear is available to us, to such an extent where a spell hit is a secondary priority. Luckily, much of the spell damage gear has spell hit, so we're not straying too far. Basically, spell damage, followed by spell hit, followed by intellect, and finally spell crit. Time for phase 4. This is where things get really good for us. Bloodvine Vest, a chest giving us 2% spell hit, is available to us. That's right, 2%. That's massive. And also gives us a decent amount of spell damage. We also get access to Rune of Perfection, which gives us that sweet option to reduce the target's magical resistance by 20. Generally, phase 4 looks like spell damage, followed by spell hit, followed by intellect, and lastly spell crit. Now, you'll notice the switch to intellect from spell crit. That's right, fights are lasting longer, so we need more mana. Now, let's take a look at phase 5 and 6. Here is where the candy shop opens for us and we get to run around in the aisles, putting all kinds of good stuff in our pockets. Anything from spell penetration gear left and right, to amazing spell damage gear with spell hit on it, you name it. The stat priority remains the same as previously. Spell damage, spell hit, followed by intellect, and lastly spell crit. As if I wasn't a nerd already, I also made a gearing spreadsheet for you guys that goes into extreme detail. I also include for you min-maxers out there a MP5 gear set that you can equip while running from one mob to another. By all means, tell me what a nerd I am in the comments. Go ahead, go crazy.
He is a nerd, but I have to say that this is a great tool, and I would definitely use it because you can click on this gear list, go to the slot you're looking for, and everything is ranked by its value. And that value is a combination of the stat priorities weighted, and it goes by phase as well, guys. Use this gear sheet, bookmark it. If you want to raid as an Elemental Shaman, I think this is a must-to-have, including the enchant spreadsheet, and using the right add-ons, making sure your totems are up, making sure you're buffing the raid in any way you possibly can.
Now for enchants, to add a little sparkle to our gear. Now, I should preface this by saying some servers treat enchants differently. Regardless, I'll provide you guys with a rough estimate of their arrival in a nicely done enchant spreadsheet. Yes, I know, I'm a nerd. We can get anything from enchant to increase our spell damage, to increase our mana, you name it, sky's the limit. No, really, there's like everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities for enchants. I would definitely follow the ones that are on the screen and use the enchant spreadsheet if you're unsure. As you can see for head and legs, it is phase dependent, so make sure you're going for the right enchant for the right phase. And on the right, you'll see that the best enchants for each slot. Again, use the spreadsheet if you're unsure.
Now, time to talk about my second favorite topic. Actually, I'd say it's my first. I'm talking about talents. Unfortunately, there only exists one talent setup. However, it yields amazing results. I'm talking about 31020. The only change I suggest is if you have a lot of spell crit, is consider switching a point from Elemental Mastery to Nature Swiftness for burst potential and to use as an emergency heal to alleviate stress from your healers at a moment's notice. However, this choice is totally up to you. Both builds are also very good for farming dungeons like Dire Maul East.
Now, guys, we'll be going over the totems. Totems are very important. Knowing what totem to use, you're going to be helpful in helping your raid using totems. If you're in a group with another Resto Shaman, make sure to complement that Resto Shaman, not work against him. Use totems he's not using. If he's putting down Mana Spring, put down Healing Stream. Most of the time, you will not be in a group with another Shaman unless you're trying to build a certain type of elemental build and work together and synergize. But just know that if you're in a melee group, which is rare because you're a caster, you will be putting down Wind Fury and Strength of Earth. If you're in a caster group, you're going to be putting down Mana Spring and you're going to be putting down Tranquil Air Totem if needed. So just know you're not just a DPS, you're also a hybrid utility bot and you're a totem bot. Those are very important things.
Now, let's talk about those little pieces of wood that you put into the ground that benefits us and other people around it, or better known as totems. In terms of Earth Totem, we're looking to improve the lives of others. Now, I don't want to see any gloomy faces out there. We have to help wherever needed. In the first spot, we have Strength of Earth Totem, which really helps melee classes. In the second spot, we have Stone Skin Totem, again, for melee classes. Those lucky duckies. Next is Stoneclaw Totem, an emergency totem to readjust aggro on an accidentally pulled mob. The before last totem is Tremor Totem, a situational totem to deal with fears, for example. And lastly is Earthbind Totem, another situational totem to slow down trash in an instance. Now let's take a look at Fire Totems. Fire Totems that deal damage are very much of a luxury. Imagine yourself as having a credit card and going on a crazy shopping spree with no limits. You put down a Fire Totem and people look at you in amazement. In first place, there's Searing Totem. Nothing special here, it basically shoots fireball at the target. Next is Fire Nova Totem, which deals a massive amount of burst damage. Now, remember, I said fire damage dealing totems are a costly luxury. Well, that's because it will be more damage to cast Lightning Bolt and Chained Lightning, our bread and butter spells. Usually, fire totems, if you happen to be well equipped, will be used during periods of movement in a boss fight. Since casting them in an ongoing boss fight will trigger the global cooldown, thus halting you from casting your main spells. In third place is Magma Totem, which deals damage but requires you to be in somewhat close proximity to the boss. In fourth spot is Frost Resistant Totem, a situational totem to deal against frost damage. Also, I need to point out, fire damage dealing totems are capable of critting, scaling with fire damage related debuffs, and spell damage. Now, let's move on to the next type of totem, Air Totems. Sadly, like Earth Totems, we don't directly benefit from them. In first place is Grace of Air Totem, which gives a substantial amount of crit and dodge, which is much appreciated by most classes. In second place is Wind Fury Totem. This further helps melee classes. Ugh, they're so lucky. Unfortunately, dropping a totem places a global cooldown on us, so we're not looking exactly to use it, but we may be asked if it's an absolute necessity. In the third spot is Nature Resistance Totem, a situational totem to deal with nature damage. In the fourth spot is Tranquil Air Totem. I have to point out, every raid group has a fellow shaman putting down this totem to reduce threat, especially if Fury Warriors are present. However, remember, never use this totem when in the tank group within a raid. The before last spot is Grounding Totem to redirect ranged spells. And lastly is Windwall Totem to reduce the damage taken from ranged attacks. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen Windwall Totem. Now, I'm sure at this point you guys are absolutely tired of hearing me talk about totems, but I swear this is the last type of totem. Let's talk about water totems. In first place is Mana Spring Totem, which should always be either placed by you or a healing shaman with the talent Restorative Totems. Next is Mana Tide Totem, a 31 restoration point talented totem exclusive to healing shamans. Try your best to get into a group with a healing shaman, as Mana Tide Totem is a mana regen improvement from Mana Spring Totem. Third is Healing Spring Totem, providing an area with negligible amounts of healing. Next is Poison Cleansing Totem. Unfortunately, we can't suck the poison out of our allies, so we'll use this totem instead. Fifth is Fire Resistance Totem, to help us with high amounts of fire damage, for example, in Molten Core. And lastly is, well, honestly, I want to thank you guys for making it this far, is probably the most anticlimactic totem, Disease Cleansing Totem, which unfortunately rarely sees the light of day. The next topic are spells. Now, I'm sure you guys noticed I did mention a few spells here and there. I'll cover the most common spells within our spell toolkit. It's pretty simple. There's Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning. But knowing the correct rank of Lightning Bolt to use is quite tricky, and will depend on your gear, buffs, boss fight length, etc. As a general rule, cast Chained Lightning when Elemental Focus or Elemental of Mastery is active off of cooldown. I should mention there are situational spells to use, such as Flame Shock when a abundance of fire debuffs are on the boss, and nature resistance on the boss is still a hindrance. Lastly is Frost Shock, which is used if the boss will most likely die faster than it takes you to cast a Lightning Bolt or Chained Lightning, which is 2.5 seconds. Let me explain in further detail in the next section, Rotation. Rotation, rotation, rotation. Get it? That was a real estate joke because of location. Anyway, let's look at basic rotation applicable in the early game. In the pre-pull phase, make sure all buffs and relevant totems are down. Next, you're going to want to cast Lightning Bolt rank 10. move 20 yards in front of you so you're at the appropriate distance to cast shocks, and pop a limited invulnerability potion in case you get aggro. Follow immediately up with a chained lightning, and then cast lightning bolt rank 9 until elemental focus procs. If 4 casts go off without a proc, cast 2 rank 8 lightning bolts and repeat. Next, cast chain lightning rank 4 when procs occur. If chain lightning just went on cooldown, cast rank 9 lightning bolt instead. If chain lightning will be available in about half a second or less, wait. When elemental mastery is available, use and cast rank 4 chain lightning. Now, you're going to want to try and keep this rotation up for as long as possible by popping consumables and potions. If you cannot sustain max rank lightning bolt spams, down rank instead. If you have sufficient mana, upgrade to casting rank 10 and rank 9 of lightning bolt. I promise you guys, I know some of you are thinking, oh, I need to perceive the matrix to understand this rotation. It's not that complicated, it just sounds complicated. You'll get used to it very quickly. Let's move on to the advanced late endgame rotation. Oh my god, Caperfin's gonna cover it, yes he is! If you can't perform everything in here, it's not really the end of the world. It does get a bit more complicated, even I have to admit that. Typically this rotation is applied in phase 5 or 6, or if you have very good amounts of mana. Basically, in the pre-pull phase, make sure all buffs and relevant totems are placed down. Cast rank 1 lightning bolts on an unconscious dig rat to proc the tier 2.5 3-piece set bonus and or elemental focus. Next, cast lightning bolt rank 10 and move 20 yards in front of you so you're at the appropriate distance to cast shocks, and activate a limited invulnerability potion in the unfortunate scenario you get aggro. Immediately follow it up with a chain lightning. Now, let's view the rotation exclusive to phase 6. In the pre-pull phase, it does share the same similarities with the previous rotation by casting rank 1 lightning bolts to proc the tier 2.5 3-piece set bonus. Next, activate the restrained essence of Saffron or any other spell damage trinket and continuously spam chain lightning during the trinket's duration. Next, cast chain lightning whenever the tier 2.5 3-piece set bonus triggers or during elemental mastery. If chain lightning just went on cooldown, cast lightning bolt rank 10. If chain lightning will be available within half a second, wait. Otherwise, cast rank 10 lightning bolt. If you are below 18% mana and elemental focus procs, cast chained lightning. Otherwise, cast rank 10 lightning bolt until the next proc. If after 4 casts of lightning bolt do not proc elemental focus, cast rank 8 lightning bolt until the proc occurs. Let's talk about situational rotation. Basically, stuff that can't be done all the time, but you should know what to do when it happens. For example, if you receive power infusion, prioritize chain lightning above any other spell. Please, just do it. It does so much damage. Next, try your best to synergize the tier 2.5 3-piece set bonus with your trinket activation. The troll racial berserking really helps in this situation. Next, if you're looking to cast nature swiftness, perform the following. Cast chained lightning, then nature swiftness, then rank 10 lightning bolt. Next, if flame buffet and other fire damage increasing debuffs are on the boss, cast flame shock whenever chain lightning is on cooldown. Next, if you need to move around, use frost shock and goblin sapper charge, and you can also look into dropping a searing totem or fire nova totem to further bolster your damage on the meter. You can also look into crystal charge if you need to move once again. But remember, you need to be relatively close to the boss, so pay attention. For extra Caperfin points of insane min-maxing, consume your faintly glowing skull while moving. The skull is a one-time quest reward item from Durotar. The skull increases your DPS and scales with spell power and some buffs and potions. That's right boys, I thought of everything. Anyway, I'd like to thank all of you for sticking with me until the end. It was an absolute blast. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Caperfin. Excellent job as usual. So what are the actual viable justifications of bringing an Elemental Shaman into a raid? Very fair question. Historically, Shaman have been looked down upon as far as DPSs are concerned in PvE settings and raids. Their DPS is hindered due to the nature resistance issue, and until recently, a lot of players did not really understand how to be mana efficient in a class like this. However, there is a reason that Elemental Shaman may be actually interesting to bring to a raid in guilds that aren't casual. So this is more for min-maxers. There will be places for Elemental Shaman. Our guild has one. But why would it be important for a min-max guild to bring one? This is a example. This has not been tested. This is not my idea. This is Orkbit's, and I think it's a really interesting idea. He does not claim that this is something mind-blowing, but something to think about. So I want to just offer this to you as a exercise in thought. So warlocks, especially endgame, have a lot of issues with maintaining threat. They can pull a lot of threat very easily due to a couple reasons. Due to their no talents that actually reduce their threat, and due to their crits with 100% crit bonus. So a 5 warlock group, let's say, can only produce approximately 80% of their total DPS due to the fact that they have to curtail their DPS output. You can see this in the yellow bars here. So each warlock is producing about 80% of what they could, which is 700 DPS in this example, for a total DPS of 3,500. However, if you replace one warlock in that group with an Elemental Shaman using Tranquil Air Totem, which reduces the threat generated by those other 4 warlocks by 20%, theoretically, they can reach or attain 100% of their DPS potential. So each warlock now is producing 840 DPS. If you add an Elemental Shaman, they don't have to do much in order to beat out the old group. If they're only putting on 500 DPS, that's a DPS total of 3,860, or a DPS increase of 360 DPS for that group. This is an idea that hasn't been mathed out yet. I know Orkbit is something that he wants chomping at the bit to test when Classic comes out. Something to think about, maybe a reason to bring an Elemental Shaman to a raid in this specific circumstance. This really only works if you go without one Resto Shaman, right? So if you can go without another healer, it's a possible idea, see if it works, and get back to me. Now let's get into leveling as an Elemental Shaman. You may be thinking to yourself, I want to play Elemental Shaman endgame, and I also want to level as one as well. You really wouldn't delve into the class fantasy. More power to you. Leveling as a caster type Elemental Shaman, though, is not very fast at low levels. In fact, if you play as a caster type Shaman without any talent points in the Elemental tree, it's the slowest way to level. And that's how you're going to be leveling until you hit level 40. I've tested this myself in multiple different ways, and caster type Shaman, throwing out lightning bolts, chain lightning, is a very, very slow way to level unless you have the talents to bolster those abilities. So level 40 hits, things change significantly. You actually go from the slowest to the fastest. I'm actually going to be testing when that transition actually happens, so actually be on the lookout for that. I'm working on a new leveling guide with stuff I've learned from the beta. But when you hit 40 and your 31 point talent, Elemental Mastery, opens up, you're going to be able to put out a lot more damage. Your lightning spells will cost a lot less, and they'll come out faster. That's the biggest thing. You'll be able to put out more lightning bolts per unit of time, and you'll have the intellect to really put out the damage, right? If you're going to be leveling enhancement, try to bank away those intellect pieces. Your mana pool is the most important thing. Spell power is good, but it's not as easy to come across as compared to intellect gear. If you get spell power gear, hold on to it for sure. Also, Dungeons with Elemental can be really fun from first-hand experience. Now let's go over the basics. Your stat priority. You're going to hold spell power and intellect at equal value because spell power is not easy to get. Intellect chiefly is the most important thing, but as you have the chance to get spell power gear, definitely get it. The only exception is those Nature's Wrath green pieces. They're great, but if you have no intellect to cast, you're going to be going very quick. Try to strike a balance between intellect and spell power. Next is stamina, because you're going to be out in the open world. You're going to be wearing a lot of cloth, most likely. So make sure you have the stam to stay alive. After that is MP5. It's very rare while you're leveling, but if you can get it, definitely do it. And last is Spirit. You're going to be out of the 5-second rule most of the time, but if you're really worried about regenning in between battles, have an extra set of Spirit gear, swap back and forth. The only thing is the Shaman don't benefit from Spirit nearly as much as Warriors, so just keep that in mind. Your rotation is pretty easy. You're going to place down your Searing Totem and your Mana Spring. Those are really important, and if you're not moving, put them down and keep them around you. Next, you're going to activate your max rank Lightning Shield. Having any possibility of doing additional damage is always good, so I would always put it up. It actually has a very high HPME as well, so if you're going to be hit by melee, you might as well put out some extra damage if you can. If you feel like you're putting out too much mana, don't use it. Next, you'll be casting Lightning Bolt until the mob reaches you. Some people like to play around with Frost Shocks and kiting with Earthbind Totem. I just find that just spam Lightning Bolt as much as you can until the mob gets to you. And then you're going to melee that target down like a melee, with your dagger or whatever weapon you have. I would definitely recommend, and I will go over this in my Advanced Shaman Guide Part 2, where I've tested all the weapon buffs. Rockbiter and Wind Fury are king, unless, of course, you have a lot of spell power that is not nature spell power. Remember, Flame Tongue is not affected by nature power. Only if it's pure spell power or if it's firepower, right? If you have a lot, sure, go ahead. Or if the target has a high armor rating, then you're going to use Flame Tongue, and you're going to melee that target down. Now, there are some things that could happen during combat. If Elemental Focus procs, that's your clear casting, you're going to cast Chain Lightning, of course. That's going to be a free Chain Lightning. I don't care if you're getting meleeed or not, just cast it. If Eye of the Storm procs, that's your no pushback. You're going to cast Chain Lightning again, or Lightning Bolt, whatever his mana is permitting, or whatever HP the mob's at. If the mob's about to die, don't cast Chain Lightning. And, of course, you're going to use Elemental Mastery on cooldown, and I would use it during the pull. So cast your max rank Lightning Bolt from max distance, pop Elemental Mastery, and then cast Chain Lightning. They'll hit the mob at approximately the same time for a good amount of burst damage. Now, for gearing, do not underestimate the importance of armor. If you have the choice between mail and cloth, and the mail only has like one less intellect, get the mail. Survivability is key, especially on a PvP server when someone's trying to gank you. You don't want to be like a clothy, right? You're a shaman, you're able to wear heavy armor, so do that as much as possible. Because of this survivability importance, I would highly encourage going one-hander and shield over going as a stave wielder. Having that shield, providing a lot of extra armor when you're going to be wearing a lot of cloth, could really make or break you, right? I would forego using a stave in most scenarios unless it's really, really good. Like I'm thinking of like Zumra's Vexing Cane and Zul'Farrak. But I would switch to a shield if you know you're going to be having to do some melee. Definitely have it on you at all times, just in case. Dungeons also offer a great way to get upgrades as well as quick grinding potential, so definitely consider doing dungeons as much as possible. Finally, one more tip, try to get water from mages if you can, because you'll be drinking a lot more than other shamans. So any way you can reduce that cost, do it. Let's go over the first talent build. This is the standard 31-0-20 build. The reason you're not going Nature Swiftness here is because you have to hit level 60 to get Nature Swiftness and up to right before Elemental Mastery. So this is the build that most Elemental Shaman will run. The talent acquisition order is below the talent tree, and this will provide 11% crit. So 11% will go to lightning spells, 5% of that 11 will go to healing, 3% hit both melee and spell, an additional 5% spell damage, an additional 15% fire totem damage, a removal of 1 second of your cast times of your lightning spells, 10% less mana for your lightning spells, your ability to get clear casting, 100% spell crit bonus instead of 50, your range extended by 6 yards, and Elemental Mastery, which is a free guaranteed critical strike, which you should always use on Chain Lightning. A reduction of 5% mana cost for your resto spells, a reduction of 25% mana cost for your totems, a 10-yard increase to your totem range, and a 14% chance for no pushback when healing, which could be beneficial in some circumstances. There is another build. It's the Elemental Devastation into Flurry build. This is a lot harder to do. You won't have a lot of spell crit for shocks. You'll have 6% for lightning spells. This isn't huge. You can get up to 11 if you go to the resto build, but it's still 6% is better than nothing. So you're going to fish for procs. Hopefully what's going to happen is you're going to get a crit while the creature is coming towards you, and that will increase your chance to melee crit by 9%. So you get that 6% crit, you get another 5% spell damage, you get 15% fire totem damage, and a 9% chance to melee crit increase for 10 seconds after a spell crit, removal of 1 second cast time for your lightning spells, a reduction of 8% of the mana cost of your lightning spells, you still get the clear casting proc, you still get 100% spell crit bonus, and you have Elemental Mastery. And from enhancement, you get a 5% increase to your base intellect, which isn't great, a 5% melee crit chance increase from Thundering Strikes, 15% damage bonus to your lightning shield, which I would definitely put on yourself, just in case. I would definitely have it always on before you start pulling the mob, because they will, chances are they will reach you, and then that extra damage is always nice. And Lightning Shield does have a spell coefficient, so you have nature damage or spell damage, it'll go 20-ish, 7% of it will go to Lightning Shield per orb, so that's not bad. You gain 2% chance to dodge, and you get that 30% attack speed increase after a melee crit from Flurry. So the package here is you crit with the lightning spell or shock, lower chance of that happening. The mob gets to you, you have a high chance to proc Flurry, and you finish them off with your weapon. This is a melee hybrid build. You're mostly elemental, but it's an interesting build nonetheless. If you like the more melee-oriented approach to leveling as an elemental shaman, I definitely recommend this one. Guys, we did it. Before we get to the conclusion, I just want to say there is a lot of other high-quality shaman resources out there instead of just myself and Caperfin. The Egregious Guide to Resto Shaman is the best written guide out there if you want to heal as a Resto Shaman endgame, which is a very popular choice for Shaman, of course. He also has a throughput and efficiency calculator you can use, which ranks of heals are the best for certain situations. Orc Pit also produces a lot of good shaman shaman content. He has a lot of good guides. I would definitely check out his channel as well. Cargos has some excellent shaman leveling guides that are very well done and very well thought out. His link is also in the description. I have many other shaman guides. I would definitely check out the other shaman guides. A link to that playlist will be in the description below. The Resto Shaman Progressive Best in Slot. This is best in slot for pre-raid and for each raid tier, also made by Egregious. The link to that will be in the description as well. And also Hamster Wheel has some good shaman content as well. Definitely check out his channel. Finally, last but definitely not least, Egregious and I are the heads of the Classic WoW Shaman Discord. We have an active community. We'd love to have you in there. A link to the Discord will be in the description below. Thank you so much for watching this content. Make sure to like if you like this video and subscribe if you're interested in more guides and other types of videos we make here. Also, definitely head over to Caperfin's channel and drop him a like and a subscribe. He has a lot of awesome content and puts a lot of work into his channel. In addition to guides, we also make a podcast called DefTalk and GMA, which are listenable on SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes, and Spotify. If you want to join the Defcamp Melderon TV community, you can do so by joining our Discord or our Twitter. Links are in the description. And Defcamp, my brother, streams regularly on YouTube and Twitch. His Twitch handle is twitch.tv/Defcamp. This guide, along with many others, is available on ClassicWoW.live, a resource for tools, a resource for forums, and a resource for community-based guides and other types of videos. Definitely go check us out on ClassicWoW.live. It's a very lively environment where a lot of different players come and interact. Last but definitely not least, thank you patrons for making videos like this one possible. You continually support us and drive us to make better content, so thank you very much. Also, thank you to the stream team, regular contributors to Defcamp stream on YouTube and Twitch. Thank you all so much. Keep on key binding and grinding. Peace, my shaman brothers and sisters. May the ancestors be with you, and I hope to see you in Classic Azeroth. Greetings, adventurers. Melderon here. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you'd like to sport some official Defcamp Melderon t-shirts and hoodies, head on over to Brandon Media's Defcamp Melderon TV merchandise website. The link is in the description below.